to the Believe Podcast, a conversation between friends over a passage of Scripture. I'm Carolyn Kirsten.
And I'm Marvin Williams.
And today is episode 123.
123. Love it.
So today we will be talking about Jesus feeds 4,000 and the leaders complain again.
Again, they're always complaining about Jesus.
Part two, part three.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let me ask you a question. You can choose to answer. I mean, they're pretty much kind of the same questions.
Okay.
What do you tend to forget when you forget something? What do you tend to forget? Or what are some things that are difficult to remember for you?
Okay. Very specific one comes to mind. So Drew and Lauren's birthdays, in one sense, are very easy to remember because it's March 7 and 11.
Oh, that's, yeah.
So March 7 and 11. But I do have to think through whose is whose. And I always think, okay, we came home from the hospital with Drew, and then it was Lauren's birthday. So he's March 7 and she's March 11. So that is my thinking process. I almost every time still I have to go, okay, Drew came home from the hospital, and then it was Lauren's birthday. March 7 is Drew, March 11 is Lauren. So.
I think for me, it is when I'm hurried. That's when I tend to forget things. Whether it's my
I can relate to that too.
Like I leave my keys to my office at home many times. I've either put them in one pants pocket and then I forget to get it because I'm rushing out of the door, and then I have to come here and ask someone to open my door. So I think when I'm in a hurry, that's when I tend to forget things, or when there's a large amount of things coming my way, I have a tendency to forget. And so just like we forget sometimes, we see the disciples forgetting in this episode. And it's kind of interesting because they had just experienced a large miracle. Mm-hmm. They were kind of in a similar situation, and it just like they didn't think that, like what God did in the past would actually impact their present situation. And so that's what we're kind of looking at, how Jesus does another miracle, and in so doing, he helps them to remember something that he did before. So where are we in this text?
Yes. So this the stories we're looking at today, the events are in Matthew 15 into 16, and then Mark 8. And we are in Gentile territory.
Territory. Yep.
And so even just from the title, you might have heard me say Jesus feeds 4,000. And yes, a few weeks ago, we did talk about when Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Now, that was a group of Jewish people who'd come to hear him teach, experience miracles of healing. Now we're in Gentile territory, but it is a very similar scene. Jesus has been teaching, and it's several days, and Jesus says, hey, we've got to take care of these people. They've been waiting. They need some food.
Right. And so up to this point, we know that Jesus has done a lot of work. He's healed, he's been teaching, and even prior to this, we see him healing all kinds of people. And so, just this is a quick pass, just as a reminder, people still ask the question, does Jesus heal today? And we're going to drop an anchor there and say, no, he does. Yes, he does still heal. He really does have compassion over our ailments, our sicknesses. Does he heal everyone? We can see no. We don't know all the reasonings why he heals some and doesn't heal others, but we do know that according to his sovereign grace, his compassion, his love for us, he still heals. We see it all throughout the Gospels. We see it in James chapter 5, where James says, hey, if you're sick, call for the elders. They will anoint you with oil, and God, in his sovereign grace, will heal some, and I don't know all the reasons why he doesn't heal others, but if people who are listening are wondering, does he still heal, or was that something for the Bible? We say, yes, he does still heal. And we have example after example in our church, and I'm quite sure people who are listening, you have examples in your own life where you have seen God heal. And so I just wanted to at least kind of give us a little, based on the context of the passage, and to say, no, Jesus, yes, he does still heal. And so we see that this crowd is with Jesus, and they've been with him 3 days. And the text says something about Jesus, after all of the things he's done, he's tired, he's exhausted, and yet he still has something in his heart for these people. And I love that. So what is that?
Yeah. In Matthew, verse 32, it says, Jesus says, I am unwilling to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way.
Yeah.
Which is just a lovely, he's unwilling to see them suffer. He's unwilling to just let them go. It's just another way of saying what we see over and over is he's overflowing with compassion.
Yep, absolutely.
He wants to step in. He wants to meet needs. It is a decision of his will.
Yeah.
He describes
Right,
it's not just feelings.
Right.
Actually, I think that's kind of an important. It isn't just feelings. This is a decision of his will. I am unwilling to let them go hungry.
Yeah. And again, this is something that I think we sometimes take it for granted that Jesus is touched by our pain. He is touched by our distress. He is touched by the suffering that we go through. And so we see here, he has compassion. He is touched by these people, and they've been with him 3 days. He doesn't want to send them away hungry. And so he says, hey, we need to feed these people. And the disciples, when Jesus says that, they immediately say what? Like, yes, we can do this.
Unfortunately, they don't. They say, where are we going to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd?
Yeah.
They don't remember what is just a few pages before in our Bible that Jesus fed 5,000 plus women and children. This is only 4.
Right,
but,
right.
Which it is easy to kind of think, come on, guys, what's wrong with you? Why would you not think that Jesus would step in here? Even that, that's after he says, I'm unwilling to send them away.
Yeah.
Why do you think is it just spiritual amnesia? Is it, what is it that?
I think they're just like us. I think sometimes present circumstances are so pressing that it kind of pushes out the things that God has done in the past. Yeah. And so we have, we somehow think that God's big miracles have run out. Again, I think in our discussion of this, they're in a different place. They're in Gentile territory, and I wonder if they're thinking, does God have miracles for these people?
Yeah, that could be part of it.
Yep, he definitely has a miracle for the Jewish people because they belong to him. But in this case, Gentiles, maybe not. And I think sometimes we get in a hurry. We simply are pressed by the present circumstances, overwhelmed by the present circumstances, and we have a tendency to forget. And again, I'm baffled by this. Just a few weeks earlier, Jesus feeds the 5,000, and I wonder if they are like, is he tapped out?
Yeah.
Is he tapped out of miracles, and can he do it again? And I wonder if that was their situation, but I know it's sometimes ours that we wonder, like, I don't really want to bother him again, and I don't know if he has a miracle for me again. And yet we see Jesus says, hey, I want you to know that that I can do it again and again and again.
And I think there is an element, too, of our default. It makes me think of the proverb. Our default is to think it's up to us.
Yeah.
Like the proverb, don't lean on trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding.
Yeah.
I think they were leaning on their understanding of the situation. Like, it's all these people. We don't have much. How is this? We're in a desolate place.
Right.
This does not add up. They were leaning on their own understanding instead of trusting.
That's really good.
Trusting in Jesus, which 100% I will do that. Like, I just look at it with my own a situation with my own understanding and think, oh, I either how can I make this happen? Got to problem solve it. But trusting in the Lord as my default versus my own understanding.
And I think when we do that, when we look at our ability, we automatically focus on the limitations. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they did. They focused on the limitations. They didn't go to Jesus first. They again, as you mentioned, they went inside themselves. There's no, and I think Luke says, where will we get enough to feed this great crowd?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes in our minds, we think the crowd is too great. And that's metaphorically speaking for God to do something that big. And so to your point, when we lean on our own understanding, we have a tendency to focus on the limitation as opposed to the abundance of God's power.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting with you. I'm double clicking on what you're saying. It's like I want my default to be, no, God has enough power to handle the limitations and the impossibilities, the seemingly impossibilities. So
And then to help ourselves change that default, I think it makes me go back to our season when we talked about spiritual rhythms and habits, and even a daily examine of reflection on where we saw God at work in our lives. That helps us. That remembering and reflecting then does help change our default.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, yeah, God was there with me yesterday, and he'll be there with me today. Actually, in spiritual parenting, I talk about an example when I started a meal in the crock pot and then I walked away and then 20 minutes later came back to realize that it wasn't plugged in.
Wow.
Which is just, that's it for a crock pot meal. Like if I hadn't come back, 4 hours later, you can't speed it up. So in that moment, I talked to my kids about that. Like, wow, I'm so glad that God caused me to go back to the kitchen and notice that wasn't plugged in. That just, and that, those little Facebook memories, how fun that is. That was just a few days ago in 2012, I think. So it was fun to, even Facebook helped me reflect and remember a way that God showed up with a crock pot meal that night.
Yeah, the disciples should go back and listen to that season about spiritual habits, and we talked about journaling. Had they journaled, they probably would have seen that Jesus fed 5,000 people just a few weeks ago.
That's another great way to help us reflect and remember.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the situation. Jesus, he does almost the exact same thing, if not the same thing, that he did when he fed the 5,000, which he took it, he broke it, he blessed it, and then he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples, they ended up, again, passing and distributing the food. We have 7 loaves this time and a few fish. We don't have the specifics on the fish, but we do have the specific on the loaves. They distribute the bread and the fish. And again, it's almost like clockwork. Everyone was fed. Everyone was satisfied. And then there were 7 baskets left over. And so, again, we talked about this just a few episodes ago. It's that God says, I'm a God of abundance. I am not a God of scarcity. And I'm hoping that this time they got it. They wrote in their journal that he did it again, and maybe took some pictures of it. I don't know. I'm just playing. So, but again, we see this amazing miracle, a miracle once again, and I think hopefully they get it this time, and so hopefully we'll get it as well.
Yes, although in Mark it shows us that they really don't quite get it. We said at the top that the leaders complain again, but there is also an element of the disciples we learn from them as well. So the Pharisees do confront Jesus again. They're trying to figure out, where's this guy getting his power from? Yep. What is his deal? He's not following our guidelines. Like they just are, they're wanting to figure out who is he? And he's getting under their skin.
Right.
They're not following. He's not following what they want him to do. And in Mark, verse 15, Jesus says to his disciples, well, first in 14, it says, the disciples had forgotten to bring bread. Yeah. So they're in the boat. They've forgotten to bring bread. And then Jesus says to them, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now, the disciples start whispering to each other, oh, it's because we forgot bread, isn't it? Oh, shoot. That's why he's talking about leaven or yeast. And so, again, they think, oh, it's about us. And we've goofed up again with the food. But it's here's the comfort in that. They are for sure. We see them growing in maturity.
Exactly.
He didn't choose these guys because they were the scholars of the day.
Yep.
They weren't the professionals. They were just ordinary guys, and we see them. They're growing. And they are catching on. Well, and we'll see that more and more actually in coming episodes. So I do think that's a little comforting. Jesus chose them like he chooses us. We don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
We don't have to know all the things.
Yeah. And
We're in process too.
and the Pharisees, Jesus is talking about the Pharisees. He's talking about the leaven, and leaven in the Bible represents sin and how bad choices, sinful choices, and if we allow just a little bit of it to find a place, a lodging in our hearts, it will have an amazing or have a large effect in our lives. And so Jesus is trying to get them to understand, hey, guard your hearts, because he ended up, I think in Mark as well as Matthew, he said their hearts were hardened. And when our hearts are hardened, that's when we're susceptible to letting a little bit of yeast come in. Mm-hmm. And so even guarding just a little bit. So they're thinking one thing, and Jesus is talking about something totally different, but they're actually connected. Hey, friends, guard your heart, because if you just let a little bit of unbelief in, you let a little bit of sin in, it will impact the entire thing. And so that's the reason they said, it's because we forgot bread, and Jesus wants them to understand, hey, listen, remember the blessings of the past, because they will have an impact in the present. And so, again, I think you're right. They're learning. I'm glad the writers give us an authentic look at these individuals, because it gives me hope. For when I forget, it gives me hope when I don't guard my heart and I let a little bit of leaven come in. But we see Jesus working another miracle so as to get them to reflect and remember, and hopefully to learn more and more that Jesus is truly their Messiah who can really do anything.
Yeah, and when Jesus picks up on this, that they're talking about, it's because we don't have bread, he reminds them, hey, guys, you don't need to worry about that. Remember what I've just done. And I think that, too, is a good reminder that we see Jesus providing corporately for this huge group as well as our personal provision.
Love it.
He is God in the big things. He's that God of abundance in these big situations. And he's also a God of abundance and provision in just our everyday moments.
Yeah.
Strength equal to what each day holds. Like he will provide that. And he's reminding the disciples of that. It's the big things and it's the little things.
Many scholars say, we can argue from the greater to the lesser, the greater to the lesser, particularly in the area of if God can create the world, the big celestial ball on which we live, then most certainly he can handle our small world. So we argue from the greater to the lesser. He created this world. He sustains this world. And by the same token, he can create worlds for us, and he can sustain our little worlds, our families, our careers, our finances, those kinds of things. And I think the same thing here. We can argue from the greater to the lesser. If he can feed 5,000 and 4,000, most certainly he can take care of 12.
Come up with a little bread for the 12.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So absolutely, he does the individual and the corporate, and that's the kind of God we serve.
Absolutely. Yeah. What can we believe about God, ourselves, and others from these stories?
Yeah, one of the things that that Jesus has compassion. He is filled with compassion, even in his fatigue, even after healing and teaching, even in his fatigue, he still has enough room in his heart for us. He has room in his heart for our ailments, our suffering, our pain. And so just like he had compassion then, we can trust that he still has compassion on us now. And I love that about him, is that it's not about condemnation. It's not about judgment. It truly is when we've been in the desolate places for a long time,
Yeah.
he still has compassion on us. And so that's one of the things I can to believe about God in this season is that his compassion. I think the second thing for me personally is that I have to trust that he can provide. He can truly provide. That he is God in the big things and he is God in the small things. And so those are some things that learn about God and learn about myself.
Yeah, and that he is God in the big things and the little things is what is standing out to me. Some ways, it's easier for me to trust him in the big things.
Yeah, yeah.
But then it's the little things that I think either aren't important enough or more dangerous, probably, that I can handle those.
Yeah, yeah.
So then for myself, it is that not leaning on my own understanding. And again, the challenge is in those everyday moments when I think maybe I can handle it, but still relying on him, looking to him in gratitude, noticing how he's at work each and every day in my life. And then that too then makes it easier to trust him in those big things too. So
Yeah, good stuff.
yes. Thank you, friends. Thanks for joining us. Encourage you to read through the scriptures. Remember, there is a PDF download of the entire reading plan. You can go back and read through all of the Gospels chronologically with us. We will talk with you next time.